You've been in prison a few years now and know very well that things can go off at any moment. And that's exactly what happened this morning when you were out in the yard. There was some kind of commotion and all of a sudden you heard the command to get down on the ground. You look up at the tower and a guard has his gun aimed somewhere to the left of you. Word goes out fast that someone has been shivved, and while that might be a big deal on the outside, it doesn't exactly come as a shock to you. What bothers you more than someone being grievously hurt is the fact that you're going to be put on lockdown. You hate being on lockdown, and now this is how it'll go down. First of all, we should tell you that when a shot caller orders a hit like this, it's a pretty big deal. Not in the terms of it being violent and possibly fatal, but because lockdown is very bad for business. A lockdown disrupts the flow of drugs and other business in prison. So if you're partly the reason for that, you might upset a few people and of course, put a dent in your own money-making schemes. Violence is often the reason for a lockdown. Not long before we wrote this show, there was a lockdown at the maximum security prison called SCI Green in Franklin Township, Pennsylvania. An officer there was stabbed multiple times by an inmate, and when another officer went to help him, he was hit over the head with a padlock that was inside a sock. Ouch! Both officers were sent to the hospital and recovered from their injuries. A few days before that, in Mississippi, an inmate was killed in a fight, and a whole bunch of officers were injured in the ensuing violence. That was the second inmate that was killed in the state that week, and to prevent any more violence, quite a few prisons in the state were put on lockdown. The worst thing that can happen in prisons is if fights spread. In some cases, this might lead to full-blown riots, and in the past, prisoners have even taken over parts of the prison. Fights aren't the only reason for lockdowns. Sometimes, after searches, guards will find weapons, drugs, or other contraband like mobile phones, and this happens all the time and it might lead to a lockdown. Weirder things can happen too, such as a bunch of inmates get really sick at the same time. Prisons might believe some kind of virus is the reason, but often it's down to a batch of dodgy drugs that the inmates have taken. In 2018 in Pennsylvania, almost 100 inmates and staff suddenly reported feeling very ill. Synthetic drugs were to blame. And it wasn't that staff and all those inmates all had taken the drugs, but some had actually accidentally inhaled some of the smoke. Prisons aren't exactly known for their great ventilation systems and clean, fresh air. Some other major reasons why prisons might be put on lockdown is merely because guards receive intelligence that something is going to go off. Maybe they've heard that one gang is going to attack another gang, or that a particular prisoner is arriving and he has a reputation and might get attacked. The last reason for lockdowns is simply that the prison is understaffed that day. This could lead to fights or easier movement of contraband or even escape. If someone does escape, you can be sure that there will be a lockdown after that. If a riot breaks out, then you can be damn sure that the lockdown will be more than 24 hours. But how long can lockdowns be? In 2016, at Clinton Correctional in New York State, fights broke out and that turned into a riot. A guard's worst nightmare. It was a bad time for the prison because not long before that riot, 2 convicted killers managed to escape from the prison. When that riot broke out, the prison was on lockdown for an entire week. Okay, so how do lockdowns work? Well, in most prisons, the doors can automatically lock, but that's no good if men are out in the yard or eating. And if that's the case, they'll be sent to their cells and then the doors will be locked. Sometimes prisoners might just be confined to certain areas of prison, but not in a major cell lockdown. The entire prison might be put on lockdown, but it's more common for only a certain wing or a block to be put on lockdown. Prisons can be massive places, and some areas might be where the really dangerous folks are housed and other areas where you'll find prisoners not deemed dangerous. If something big has gone off, like a riot, every prisoner might be locked down, and they'll stay locked down until the situation has been sorted out. That might mean a matter of hours, or it might mean an entire week or months. In these cases, non-correctional staff such as teachers will be removed from the prison for their own safety. If you think that's over the top, just read about the Attica prison uprising in New York in 1971. Around 2,200 inmates took over the place and took 42 staff hostage. They demanded better treatment and their human rights protected, so that's why it was called an uprising rather than a riot. 10 staff, including civilian staff, died during the uprising, as well as 33 inmates. In 2019, prison staff in the UK were forced to leave one particular part of the prison after inmates started attacking them. Their weapon of choice were pool balls. So this kind of thing is a big reason why prisons go into lockdown. Usually the guards will notice the tension and lock prisoners down before things go really wild. Then there are situations where you don't even know why you're being locked down. This can lead to a fair bit of anxiety for the prisoner. Firstly, they don't know how long it will last. Maybe they'll wonder if visits will be canceled. Maybe someone near and dear has traveled a long way to visit them. What's worse, of course, is that they're not at fault for the lockdown. Some prisoners might have an important phone call to make, while others might be wondering if they'll get that letter they so desperately need from their lawyer. Others might need a hit of tobacco or might have another kind of addiction, so they'll be very tense during the lockdown. Not long ago, prisoners at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Wisconsin were locked down for weeks on end. You can imagine the tension, because the prisoners had their privileges taken away from them. It took 4 weeks for them to get some of those privileges back, which included getting hot meals, having visits, being able to use the phone. Some of the minimum custody inmates were allowed to serve food and do laundry though. You might wonder why the prison was so strict. Was it a riot, an escape? Nope, it was because 3 officers were attacked in a period of 9 days. The prison had had enough, and all the inmates had to stay in their cells with 0 privileges. Food was served to them through the door, and it was cold food served in a paper bag. This is not always the case with a lockdown. Sometimes the inmates will be taken out of their cells and allowed to eat in the chow hall, but this is often done in small groups. It's quite time-consuming when guards unlock, say, 5 doors at a time and let those prisoners eat, and this group eating might be similar to how prisoners shower. In some cases, a group might be able to go to the shower room just once every 3 days. Mississippi prisons seem to be the place where a lot of lockdowns happen, and the reason is inmate-on-inmate violence that has lately led to deaths. Some prisons in that state early in 2020 were on lockdown for many weeks after violence. That violence, said some people, was partly due to the inhumane conditions that the prisoners were kept in. Activists as well as inmates talked about appalling conditions, and staff are stressed because there's not enough of them. The problem with the lockdowns is stress levels just get worse, so it's kind of a vicious cycle. Inmates even use illegal mobile phones to take videos of dead rats in cells, mold on the walls, and totally disgusting-looking food that contained no protein. Some inmates even started suing the prison for breaching their human rights. Suffice it to say, lockdown in that Mississippi prison must be quite unpleasant. Weeks and weeks on lockdown in Mississippi is quite an extreme case. If a fight breaks out and someone is not badly injured, a lockdown might be quite short. What will generally happen after the lockdown is cells will be searched and officers will be looking for a weapon. They will no doubt find all sorts of contraband, which is one reason why some inmates really hate it when someone has been attacked. They might lose their hooch or their tattoo pin or their beloved stamps. What also might happen during a lockdown is interviews with prisoners. What did they see? Who was involved? Since snitches get stitches, usually the staff will get nothing out of the prisoners. Even the person that got attacked and actually received some stitches won't snitch. What happened on the yard stays on the yard. If they do find the culprit, he will be removed from the population and might face solitary confinement, extra days added on to his sentence, or be formally charged with the crime. Once he's out of the way, the staff will hold a meeting and discuss if it's safe to resume normal prison activity. If prisoners are locked down, you might wonder how workers go about their day. Well, there are some people who won't be locked down, and these are what are called critical workers. These guys might be the people who clean the place or make the meals. But if the lockdown is for an extreme case, even those guys won't get to do their job. We found a case in which no one, and we mean no one, was allowed out of their cell in one prison for 7 whole months. How's it feel to be locked up so long? Well, one prisoner said he felt like a caged animal, and every day was just so monotonous. He hated the fact that he knew every day was going to be the same. This is how another prisoner described lockdown. As the cell doors slammed behind me, I hypothesize and try to figure out the probability of the time on lockdown. Then it comes, that echo from the insidiously ominous click. The click that sparks a moment of panic and feeling of entrapment. The click that tells you that you are now locked in your cell and there is nothing you can do about it. I feel I'm being buried alive. My cell feels like a tomb. He said that during lockdowns he would always get anxious and depressed. He never knew how long they would last, and most of the time he had no idea why they had happened. They could be hours or days or weeks or months, and he really hated that cold food in a bag. There's also the fact that you might be trapped in a cell with another man. Since lockdowns cause anxiety, prisoners might get on each other's nerves or even start to stink, and they might end up fighting. This is not unusual. One prisoner described how angry some people get during lockdown. He wrote, "Anger will grip you and turn on you, and most prisoners with long sentences have felt this compelling emotion. It shakes you to the utmost degree and causes you to fight for your mental sanity. Then, when you get your cell shaken down by guards and lose some of your precious things, and after you face the humiliation of yet another strip search, that anger can double. Not all prisoners get used to being told to bend over, spread their cheeks, and cough. It's especially annoying for people who keep their head down and never cause trouble. They feel they're being unfairly punished. One inmate said he'd been in a lot of lockdowns and that they could last a day or months. He said because they happened so often, he would always have what he called a war chest. This was his special lockdown box that he filled with necessities. In his war chest, he said he would always keep 5 deodorants, 5 toothpastes, and 5 lotions. He would also stack it with coffee and more than 200 soups. He said to not annoy your cellie, you have to keep the place very clean and really be good about your personal hygiene. To stop himself from smelling bad, he would take regular bird baths during lockdown, which is an all-over wash using the sink, a mug, and some soap. And get this, in 1983, inmates at the federal penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, were locked down. Some had no idea why and wondered if it would be a day, a week, and maybe a little more. The prison went into permanent lockdown after 2 guards were killed and became a kind of super maximum security prison. Prisoners could, however, spend an hour a day in personal workout areas outside. During a lockdown, what most men say is they just wait for the familiar sound of that click. But this can get to a person when it never seems to come. If you want to know how it might feel, one former prisoner gave this advice. Go into your bathroom, take out your shower and replace it with a bunk bed. Have someone else come in there with you. Maybe you know them, maybe not. Close the door and stay in there for 2 weeks. If you want to know more about prison and you wonder if you would survive it, why not watch these gritty prison videos? You don't want to be sent to this prison, worst prison in the world in 2019. And what happens in the H unit at Federal Supermax Prison.